for you. These note cards were designed by students here in the Council Bluffs Community School District, and the certificates that I have for you were sent by the president of the Iowa Association of School Boards. So I'm going to walk around and thank you. And as I'm doing that, if Ms. Ostrowski would please move forward to the podium to begin our employee and our student recognition, so that we have a lot on our presentation for tonight, and we want to get things moving. So hopefully I can do this quickly. Maybe Dean, if you would help me. They have names on the cards, so if you'll follow me, I don't know where Mr. Arthur's is, but if you'll send, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. You sure you want me to go?
Go there and wait. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, please don't do that yet. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Yes. And at this time, have you finished yet? I'm going to scoot over here so I have to go outside and go back in. And again, we want to thank you, and if I could get everyone that's here to give a round to our school board and thank them for their services. And now, Ms. Ostrowski, you're going to do employee first or student?
Let's do student.
All right, student first. Here we go.
All right. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
This is our student spotlight for the month. We have 3 students here who we'd like to honor for a very special accomplishment. The ACT is a test many high school students take to measure their college readiness. You will be hearing more about the ACT throughout the year as our results come back. But a perfect score on the ACT or any subtest is 36. Tonight, we are pleased to introduce to you 3 students who earned perfect scores on a subtest. Isn't that a great accomplishment? Mm-hmm. That shows they are more than ready to be successful in college. However, we have a sophomore, a junior, and a senior, so they're all ready for college, even though they've got 2 of them have much more learning to do in high school, right? So why don't we start with our sophomore, Mr. Jacob Brady, ACT subtest perfect score in science. Congratulations to you. And Dr. Morello, he has several family members here to enjoy this celebration with him.
Awesome. Awesome. We'll do it at the end.
Okay. Go ahead and come on up here. Next, we have junior Sierra Dogan. Sierra had a perfect subtest score on reading. Congratulations, Sierra. And finally, our senior, soon to be heading to the University of Iowa, is Ms. Haley Hartman, perfect score in reading. Congratulations. Yes, please. And if Daniel's nearby, he's going to come in with the camera. There he is. I see it. Look at right on cue. What a team. If the parents and grandparents, please, would you stand to be recognized and thanked for your leadership. And siblings. There you go. There's your siblings. And a special guest is former Superintendent Dr. Richard Christie is here as a grandfather tonight, though. Yeah. Yep.
Isn't that nice?
Mm-hmm.
Are we ready? Yep.
Is there your face just peeking out in the background of the photos?
Okay. Looking at. There it is. We have 2 staff members to celebrate tonight as well. One of them was not able to join us. She had family commitments, and I'll share with you a little bit about our support staff member of the month, Miss Megan Gallagher. Megan is a cook server at Wilson Middle School. Megan has been outstanding in stepping into the lead cook shoes at Wilson Middle School this year. She's done an excellent job keeping up with the pressure of making sure all the right amount of food is prepared for the school day. Even when she's needed early in the morning, she pitches right in and never complains. She has 3-year-old twins at home, which might explain why she's not here. I know it isn't easy, her nominator said, trying to get them ready early in the morning and get off to her work. But her nominator said, we've enjoyed her working in our kitchen. She's a great asset to our crew, and we're very proud of Megan, and we'll make sure she gets her award. Our next honoree is our licensed staff member of the month. And our licensed staff member for April is Miss Ashley Christians from Longfellow Elementary. Yes, so you have to stand there and not be embarrassed. Okay. You can tell, her nominator said, that Ms. Christians cares by the way her students remember her and reach out to her for a conversation. She's dedicated, and it shows in her engaged classroom. Ms. Christians leads and learns alongside her team, supporting all members. She helps her teams of third-grade teachers to be strong. Ashley equips all students with the ability to be ready to take on any problem that comes their way, and she supports a problem-solving mentality. Ashley is never afraid to ask questions or gather more information to ensure that she understands what she is teaching. Her students know that their job is to learn, and that although she is their teacher, she can also learn from them. Ms. Christians pushes educational expectations higher for her third-grade classroom. She attends classes outside of regular contract hours. She is continuously filling her toolbox at CBU courses. Ms. Christians inspires her students every day to keep digging and to #ProveIt! Exclamation point. She lifts her teammates up with encouraging words and support. She praises students for the compassion they show to others. She creates strong relationships with students by being fun, but caring, and but caring and fun. Whether she is sharing jokes, singing, or showing off her dance moves, her students love her enthusiasm for life and learning. Ashley Christians deserves the recognition for her exceptional compassion and leadership, and those at Longfellow are lucky to have her as part of our team. And I'm sure Mr. Gary Milbourne, principal of Longfellow, would echo all of these thoughts. So congratulations to Ashley. Yes. And while Dr. Murillo and President Arthur are thanking the family members, I don't know if Mom had any tears back there. She might have, okay. But each of our employees of the month receive a gift certificate and a trophy that is courtesy and in partnership with our Council Bluffs Community Education Foundation, and we appreciate their support in making this recognition possible. So, thank you.
Her mom was just sitting there crying. So proud of her.
So now we'll move on to student achievement. Dr. Merlo?
Thank you. At this time, we'll have Dr. Worthman come to the podium. He is going to present tonight for us the school culture survey results, and I think you will find this pretty fascinating. And we have transitioned to a new assessment, and Dr. Worthman is going to walk you through our baseline scores tonight. So, Dr. Worthman, the floor is yours.
Oh, great pictures.
Excellent. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I'm excited to share with you tonight some information about our recent administration of our school culture survey. I wanted to take an opportunity to kind of cover some ground about data that we've collected in the past and how we are transitioning to this measure that was included in your board packet, and then provide with you some district level overview results for different scores within that data set, as well as a look at comparative data for how we looked at other schools that look like us. So as you recall, climate and culture survey data is not new to us. It's something that we have been, as a school district, utilizing since 2012, which was the first time that we administered what was called the Insight X assessment instrument, which is developed by a company called HumanX Ventures. And as you know, that data set was collected every fall of every year, and then we reported annually to the board about the progress that we made with relation to the HumanX score. That was a strong instrument, and it helped us set some goals related to some areas where we wanted to see achievement increase in terms of participation of staff around I think what the board at that time called best place to work. And so we were proud of the work that we did there, but we also received some feedback, a lot of feedback, especially from building principals and leadership teams about the specificity of which they were able to dive down into the data to do some additional analysis and then take action. So we listened to them and asked them how we might do it better. And maybe come up with an instrument that might help us reflect more carefully on what actually was going on inside the school building itself. And we identified a new survey instrument this year produced by a company called Panorama Education. So what were we really looking for? When we started this conversation back in the fall about identifying a different measure, if one existed, we were looking for a measure that was really education specific. Something that took into account the nuances of what happens inside of a school building, the relationship that teachers and staff members cultivate with their building administrator that may be unique, I think, to those who work in education when compared to those who may work in a very corporate culture. We also wanted something that was building centered. And the reason we wanted to do that is our work is in school buildings. Where we are most closest to the important things that go on is in classrooms and the relationship that principals have as leaders in those school buildings and how they interact with the people that they work with on a day-to-day basis. We wanted to get closest to the work to identify what we could do to improve the work. Third, as the board has kind of pushed us the last couple of years, is looking at us, how do we compare to others? And we know that that was one of the limitations of the HumanX survey, is we had some broad identification of how the HumanX survey compared to others in industry, business and industry globally, but we certainly couldn't see how we looked compared to other educational organizations. So that was one of the things we looked for. We also were trying to identify an opportunity, as we do often in education, to look at better ways to disaggregate. How can we do a better job of pinpointing where we can take action and make a difference? And then lastly, we wanted to honor the people's time who actually took the survey so that it wasn't so laborious to actually sit down and answer the questions. So we're looking for something that had a little bit more efficiency in the administration period. That's why we landed on Panorama. So a couple of things I wanted to note today that makes Panorama different than what we're currently used to in the HumanX survey. First of all is the way that the items are constructed. And the Panorama Survey is developed out of UC Santa Barbara, been tested for reliability and validity independently, and currently has over 3 million responses from across the United States. So a pretty robust data set that continues to grow over time. They use what is considered to be the most cutting-edge best practice in survey methodology and development of survey items, and which is changing in our world. If you've taken a survey recently, it probably doesn't look like the old Likert survey that you're probably familiar with, which is choose a response from strongly disagree to strongly agree, or from 1 to 10. So they're really trying to, research is really telling us that they need to elicit an emotional and immediate reaction from people in order to get a true indicator of how people are feeling. And it is split second, because you only capture attention for a split second. So what they've done is identified some ways in which to do that. One is wording questions, wording items as questions rather than statements. So it really asks you to reflect. Secondly, eliminating the agree-disagree, because what's in the middle of agree and disagree? Neutral. And where do people always gravitate to? The middle. Asking about one idea at a time, and this happens oftentimes, and it happened in the HumanX survey. They would combine 2 or 3 items together. So, for example, they would say, tell us about the impact and effectiveness of your building principle. Well, which is it? The impact or the effectiveness? And to use 5 response options. And I'm going to show you an example here in a minute. And then lastly, make sure that the response options are verbally labeled. So what that means is, instead of using the strongly agree to strongly disagree, make them terms that people have to associate with. So here's an example. 2 very similar questions, one from HumanX, one from Panorama, done differently. So the one on the left, my left, or my right, your left, is from the HumanX survey. My supervisor / administrator, problem number 1, which is it, effectively communicates his or her expectations. You choose from strongly agree to strongly disagree. It's a statement rather than a question. It gives you a neutral, and the response items are not verbally labeled. The Panorama survey, on the other hand, is a question that elicits a reflection. How effectively do school leaders communicate important information to teachers? So now we've drilled down on communication, but the most important information. And instead of asking us to agree or strongly disagree with that, we ask them how effective it is. Really effective, or kind of effective, somewhat, or really not effective at all. The other thing that the Panorama survey does is when they aggregate all the data together, the only 2 categories that count in favorability are the top 2. The third one doesn't count. So you're really trying to gauge how much people agree. In the HumanX survey, we took a rolling average of all of them together. And you know what happens when a lot of people gravitate toward the polls and a few people in the middle? You get skew. And so what happens is we didn't see a lot of movement in our HumanX scores. It would be hundredths of a point, one way or another. And we had to use that to say either we were getting better or we were getting worse. So what we really wanted to do was try to eliminate that middle and push people to really tell us what they're feeling so we can do something about it. So that's why we landed with Panorama this year. So the results I provided you in your board packet, you have both the district responses to multiple topics that are addressed in the Panorama survey. There are about 10 topics in all that can be assessed. We chose 6 that we thought were most important to us at this given time, based on the feedback that we had from the HumanX survey, as well as initiatives that we've been trying to work on in the school district over the past few years in terms of culture. So they're listed for you up there on the board, all the ranging from how teachers perceive their ability to work with diverse students, all the way down to how well they believe they can actually make an impact or a difference in the teaching force. So what I wanted to provide to you is a high-level overview of our district results tonight, and I'm going to focus in on how the teachers responded. We have a data set for teacher responses as well as staff responses, and I included those in your board packet. But for the sake of time tonight, I'm just going to focus in on the teacher survey, but would be happy to answer any questions you may have about both. So on the teacher survey, we had about just shy of 600 responses, which represents a little over 80% of our entire population of teachers took the survey, which is an incredible response rate. We had responses from every building, from every grade level, all the way from our elementaries, middles, and high schools, Alternative Learning Center, as well as Tucker Center. So the first question that they asked were questions around coaching and feedback. So this would be about the regular conversations that principals have with teachers around teaching. And this jumped out at us as an opportunity for growth and an area where we need to focus more effort as a district to make sure that the conversations that principals are having with teachers are both ones that propel them forward and also help deepen their practice. 41% answered favorably. And what favorably means, again, is they had to say agree or they had to say agree a whole lot. Middle does not count. So you can see we fall about in the middle, just slightly less than the middle in terms of compared to schools that look like us. Those that would be considered high poverty and urban. The second set of questions were on school climates, and this was about the social interaction that teachers have with each other, that they have with students, that they have with their principals, as well as what the climate for learning looks like in the school. And we also see that this is about 55%, so slightly more than half. So we would be above where the average mark would be nationally. We would expect that about half of the schools would fall on one side and about half of the schools would fall on another in this sample here. But again, another opportunity for us to focus in on our school improvement plans around things that are important to school climate. And you'll be receiving more information about school climate from the perception of parents and students at a later board presentation for Mr. Hamilton. School leadership was another series of questions that the survey asked, and they specifically look at the perceptions of teachers around the effectiveness of their principal. And remember, we asked for specific feedback on what was going on in buildings, and we got it. So this represents the district average. About 57% of our folks responded favorably to these questions. And in your board packet, there were some specific examples of what those items might look like. This was about the 60th percentile, so over toward more than half. Staff and leadership relationships were generally positive. 68% believed that they had very favorable relationships with their principal and with their school leaders. This question, or the set of questions, also represented just about the 70th percentile, which would be a pretty strong showing. Teaching efficacy was 74% of our staff believe that they have growth professionally that they can engage in and that they can make a difference in the work that they do. One of the reasons we were so excited about how our staff answered this question is the focus of principal professional development for this entire year has been around efficacy, or what we term collective teacher efficacy, or the ability of a group of teachers to believe that together they can make a difference. John Hattie says it's one of the largest effect sizes in schools today that really has the ability to make 3 years growth in 1 year for student achievement, is the ability of teachers to believe in themselves that they can make a difference. So that was something that we were very, very happy about. And then the last one is about educating all students. And this is teachers' perception of their own ability to work with students who have special needs, whether that may be our English learners or students who have behavioral needs or students who require special education services. It's really about them operating in areas of diversity, whether that be socioeconomic or achievement or race. And so we are way toward the 81%, that's the 80th percentile, way toward past average. So what's next for us? Where are we going from here? What are we going to do with this information? First of all, obviously we've created a baseline year, so we know where we're starting. Some of those we're should be proud of. Some of them we have some work to do. So what we plan to do over the next month, we are getting into what would be considered really reflection time as we start working with principals to close out the school year. So they'll be working on data consults with their staff the last couple of days of school, as well as coordinating with their two directors. So they'll be sharing this data. We will give it to the principals tomorrow morning after we share it with our board members. And they'll be able to use it to set some goals with their staff around things that they want to focus in on getting better. We will also challenge them to set some individual and personal growth goals where they want to improve as professionals, along with their coaches, with Julie and Mark. And then what we want to do is continue to measure and monitor our progress and bring you annual updates about how we're doing. We believe that in most cases, this will, you'll hear about it again probably in October when principals share their school improvement plans. And they'll have a really strong data point to be able to use over the course of the year to check the pulse of their staff when they identify an area which they really want to go after and do some action planning for. So that's our first set of data around a new school culture measure. I would welcome any opportunities to answer questions that you might have tonight.
Any questions from the board?
Do the survey results provide you with the data that you can use to identify, you know, what's attributing to that result in a building? Or is it more, here are the results and the conversations with principals and school leaders on, okay, so why do we think the score is this for this building, or teachers in this building answered this way to this question?
Okay, so the first disaggregator is teachers and staff. So that's one way to look at the data. In our first administration, we wanted to build a lot of trust around a new measure, new instrument, a lot of uncertainty. So we did not ask a lot of disaggregating features. We didn't ask how many years of service they have, or how many years they've been in the building, or what degree they had, or how many years they've been at that grade level, or what grade level they were at specifically. That is our plan moving forward, is to add into the survey other features or variables that help us try to narrow down, do we really have a disconnect between our novice teachers who are just new to the profession versus our veteran teachers? Do we have a disconnect between how people perceive males versus females, staff members, how they perceive their school leadership? So that's our plan for the future, is to get some feedback from our leadership teams about how they use the data this year, and then what would be most beneficial for them to see disaggregated in the future. We do have that capability. At the same time, we want to maintain anonymity as well, so we get honest feedback.
I guess when I look at this, like the feedback and coaching part pops out to me.
Yeah.
When I think about all the TLC and trying to change the climate of those to provide that coaching and mentoring, I assume that was like a wow, where's the big disconnect here? But any initial thoughts on any of this, or is it really too soon to?
You know, as I look at, we did look at some of the questions. You know, once again, if you looked at the individual questions, the thing that surprises me is how many people land in the middle. So, for example, question 4 underneath feedback and coaching was, how much feedback do you receive on your teaching? And it ranged from a tremendous amount of feedback, quite a bit, some, a little bit, or none. Only 31% of our staff said a tremendous amount or quite a bit, but 40% said some. So once again, when you're taking an average, and Panorama does not include that sum in there, you've got to be above the hump. What it shows is our teachers don't believe they receive a lot of feedback. They receive some, but we don't want to be a school district where some is good enough. We want to be a school district where if teachers expect to receive a lot of quality feedback, that they're receiving it.
So were we receiving this feedback from them all along? Just curious.
Well, that's one of the things that we are a little perplexed by, and one of the reasons why we wanted to look at to see if there were other instruments out there. You know, the question that comes to my mind from the Human-X survey was the question that was always in our lowest for the 5 years, and that is, I've received meaningful feedback from my administrator within 10 days. It was always low, but we had no way to identify what made it low. What were people really trying to tell us? So if we dig into the Panorama survey, we can find that there's a big difference between how much feedback you receive, 31% favorable, versus how useful do you find the feedback that you do get. 55% said that they find it extremely useful or very useful. So that starts to, what it starts to do is help us pinpoint where the pain points really are. We could look at question by question to try to tell a story about what our teachers are really trying to tell us and what they're asking for.
That's great. That's great. So then, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'm just saying, overall, I'm guessing we're pleased with this tool,
Pleased with the tool?
at least to start.
Initially?
Yeah,
Know that we've got some work to do.
yeah.
But we're pleased with the feedback.
Yes, very pleased with the feedback. You know, one of the things, one of the biggest mistakes we can make in education is ask for people to give us feedback and then not do something with it. And our goal is to make sure that in each building, this data is shared and collaboratively teams have a conversation about how they want to move forward together.
And can we use something similar to this with our outreach to community and parents? Like, I feel like a lot of times we have a
Interesting
disconnect
you should mention
there.
that.
Okay.
I had this conversation with our representatives from Panorama the other day because their company actually started around a parent engagement survey. And so they offer a tool that's similar to this that really is about getting feedback from parents. We already have a parent survey that we use, but in the future, we may have opportunities to discuss whether there's something better out there or if maybe ours is better than theirs. I don't know the answer to that, but the ability to have this type of real-time data that drills down at this diagnostic level is out there.
I just had a couple questions. My
Please.
first one is building-specific feedback. What was the center of the focus, if any, that you found in most of the responses?
Um,
And if you can get back to me if you want, that's fine. I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, you're not putting me on the spot. I want to give you an accurate answer.
Was it that varied? or
Average,
was there
yes,
kind of-
that's exactly where I was going. Averages only tell one piece of the story. So anytime you know you have an average, there are people who are way over here and there are people over here. I guess the thing that I would say that I was most surprised by is how big the variance was in some buildings. You know, sometimes you have a perception or you may have a gut hunch, but you don't have any data that says, yeah, this is really how it is, or it's not like this. I think this data helps us paint a picture that we can use to really tell what reality is. And I think that will help in our coaching conversations with principals and leadership teams around goals that they really want to set. And for some, there are some great celebrations in here about buildings who have really been working hard on this for several years and have shown some tremendous growth.
Was there any specific questions related to administrative changes and how staff and educators felt about the overall changes related to administrative changes? Because I know that there were some fears and concerns about, you know, superintendent changes
Sure.
and building administration changes, and people were a little uneasy, and I'm just curious if that was asked in the survey.
I don't, it's not popping out at me, but I will
Okay.
go back through the survey and
Okay.
see if that is a question that was specifically asked.
I think that's something that we need to focus on
Okay.
going forward, because, and this isn't the first time that I've had conversations with people about feeling a little uneasy. Yes, my sister is a teacher in the district, and that's not who this is coming from. But there's some educators that feel like if they're not team players, that they may get some pushback about some things. And I don't want them to feel like that.
Sure.
And so that's why I'm asking if it was ever mentioned or asked in the survey, what the perception is now that leadership's been in place for the last 9 months, because I'm curious about what their thoughts are and how things have gone over the last school year. Annual updates for surveys. So we'll be doing this on an annual basis, but what's going to be done to ensure measurement throughout the year so that we can make sure that we're not waiting a year to find out how they're feeling or doing?
So a couple of things I would say to address that. One is we want to make sure that we don't get into survey fatigue.
Right.
And I always try to be kind of conscious about that because we do ask our teachers to provide us a lot of data. Whether that is tell us about how you feel about the calendar and snow days, to tell us how you feel about your use of technology, tell us how you learn, how you feel about the state's learning support survey. So I don't want to overdo it because then people start clicking.
Right.
Right now, our plan is to do this annually, but buildings to have the ability to benchmark periodically in their school improvement plan. So if you remember.
So we'll see that when we meet.
Exactly. You'll see that
Okay.
they have data what we call checkpoints along the way, that if they really want to focus, say they want to focus in on staff
Communication, yeah,
relationships,
right.
they'll be able to pull out individual questions or take all 5 questions quickly and really take the temperature of their staff to see progress. We have not had any conversations about asking staff to do this more than once annually.
Right.
We
I
certainly
think
could.
it's great that you took out the modifiers, how long they've been in the district, what
Yeah.
aid, which group, what classroom, because I think that helps them respond in a
Okay.
unanimous, non-identifiable manner.
Okay.
So I don't know what you guys think about that. But
Thanks for the feedback.
What's the cost of this product?
that's
Is
what
it
I
a
was-
I wondered if
process?
you were
Is
gonna
it
ask
a-
that.
I was
Yeah.
Okay.
hoping that somebody would ask that. And Dr. Bergman also added in there that we get the ability to do the benchmarks or the check.
Sure. So our subscription to this is for a year. We can administer it 500 times, or we can administer it once. Buildings can administer pieces of the puzzle, or the whole puzzle, or as many times as they want. The whole entire cost is less than $5,000 a year.
That's great.
It's about 20% of the cost that we were paying HumanX.
Yeah. And probably a lot better feedback.
Well, it's different feedback.
Well, I'm saying-
It's different, and so I don't want to say it's better yet, because we don't have a lot to compare it to, and HumanX was good for us. It pushed the needle on some things that needed, and it challenged us to have conversations about what was going on in terms of how people felt in our district, and I think that was important. We just want to take it to the next level.
And I also felt like with the survey that the principals could see a better alignment to the work that they do. And they need feedback, just like we need feedback.
That's right.
To ensure that we're moving in the right direction. And we may think everyone is thinking that my feedback is really good, but then I get that and I have to question myself, how often am I doing feedback? What does my feedback look like? And those are kind of things. And then we can, as a district, take this and really begin to work and coach those principals in areas that have dips. And I think that's what made it so powerful.
Did you have, maybe I wasn't paying attention, I guess. Was there anything on staff feedback on the survey itself?
No, we did not ask for specific
Okay.
feedback on the survey.
Okay.
Although I did hear some anecdotal feedback that they were very pleasantly surprised that it was easy to access. So they get a single link and they go in and they're done. So they didn't have to worry about like having a key or anything like that, or a special code, or it had to come from a specific person. And it was also quick. It's, as you build the survey, it tells you how long it should take to take it, so you can kind of set, I want to stay under about 15 minutes. And so this survey was designed to be completed in 11 to 15 minutes. There were fewer than 50 questions.
So will there be a formal message sent out about the results and what your initial thoughts and plan is?
Yep.
so that-
So the first step is, tomorrow, building principals get access to their own data, which they've been clamoring for. But we wanted you to have the first opportunity to see the data and for us to share it with you. And then we will share a message about the district-wide data and encourage buildings and leadership teams to engage in conversations during their professional development days on, I believe it's June 7th.
And then, I assuming a couple outliers shift at a average
Got it.
percentile, okay. Okay. Very good.
Thank
Any
you.
questions? Thank you, Dr. Worthman.
Thank you so much. At this time, we're going to have Ms. Julie Smith, our Director over Secondary, and Mr. Mark Schultz, our Director over, and Ms. Smith is our Executive Director over School Leadership for Secondary Schools, and Mr. Schultz is our Director over Elementary, are going to come and present on the winter math FAST results. And this is also another baseline, but I have really enjoyed seeing where our baseline is starting at and looking at where we're going next as we move that academic needle. So, Mr. Schultz?
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. Board, thank you for allowing us to inform you tonight about our FAST math. I've been a couple times in front of you this year to talk about fast reading. Same company, same acronym. So I want to talk to you tonight that Julie and I are going to talk about what FAST is, what it is not, what information it can provide us as a school district, all the way down to teachers and kids, and then what we do with this information, okay? So first of all, what is FAST? If you remember, it stands for Formative Assessment System for Teachers. And it's designed to be pretty efficient to use and not take a lot of time to administer. It's a universal math screener for all students. So we screen every student in Council Bluffs schools, students in special education, English language learners, we screen them all. And really what it is, it helps us to identify students who might possibly have some difficulties in mathematics. We want to know who these students are so we can support them in addition to our big focus on universal tier, on intervention. So we want to identify who those students are. So we administered this in February as a baseline. We've never done it before in math. Moving forward next year, we're going to recommend to do it 3 times a year. It's a very quick screener to administer. The longest part is about 20 minutes per student. For the kindergarten and first grade students, it's about 5 to 10. It's very quick. So next year, we're going to do this at the beginning of the year, first 2 weeks of the school year, so we can find out new students and any returning students that might have some difficulties. We want to find that out early so we can start supporting them through intervention. We'll do it mid-year to find out, are those students, are there other kids that are falling? Are students, are they growing? Are they doing some responding favorably to the intervention that we're doing? And then again, at the end of the year, we're going to screen, and that's going to be more of a summative to see, do we have less kids that are at risk and more kids that are doing better in mathematics? It's not an assessment like our NWEA map. It's not an assessment like our Iowa assessments. It's strictly a screener. And a screener is designed just to take the temperature. At this given point in time, how healthy are our math students? So what's going on there? All right, so it's split into 2 areas. We have K1, which is called early math. And early math is administered by our math coaches, and it's one-on-one setting. So it's the math coach and the student, the kindergartner or the first grader. And they go out to different buildings, the coaches, and they just bring the students in and they administer it very quickly. And it's anywhere from 5 minutes to 10 minutes per student. It's very efficient. That's why they also like the word fast. It's pretty quick. And in K1, it really measures that early math skill development, number sequence, understanding, number sense like within 5 in kindergarten, recognizing that 3 and 2 equals 5, 4 and 1 equals 5, so different combinations. So just assessing those kinds of early math skills. And then starting in 2nd grade, we move to the assessment, or the screener, excuse me, is called A-math, and that A stands for adaptive. And what that does is the problems change as students are taking the screener. If they're doing really, really well, they'll get more complex. And that way we can get more of a higher end screen on students. And if students are not doing as well with the questions they're being asked, the questions will get easier for them, okay? Now, starting in 2nd grade, students can take this on their own on their Chromebooks, so one-to-one computer, since we have that starting in 2nd grade. And that takes up to about 20 minutes for students. So really screening this 3 times a year, 20 minutes at the beginning of the year, 20 minutes in winter, and 20 minutes at the end of the year. It's not adding a lot more time to really grab very valuable information for us to use as teachers and as principals in our buildings. So that's really what FAST is. Next, I'm going to ask Mrs. Julie Smith to come up and talk about what information we get from FAST and then what we do with that information.
Just one clarifying bit. We do our FAST K-8. Our FAST Math is K-8, our FAST Reading is K-6. And so there is a little bit of difference. You are going to see some things up through grade 8 with FAST Math. So the first thing that, as Mark had mentioned, this doesn't really assess proficiency. It's different than that. And what it gives us is 4 categories that we would look at, beginning with the college pathway. So this tells us students who basically score at the 86th percentile or above, they're saying these are college pathway kids and really at no risk whatsoever of having difficulties in math at this point in time. Then they talk about kids with low risk. And low risk is a broad range. It goes from, I believe, the 30th percentile to the 85th percentile. And so that's a broad range of kids. And what it's basically saying here is, you know, your core math program is working for these kids. You know, it's pretty much working. They're at very low risk that they're going to have some troubles going on with math. Some risk brings that down a little bit, and this is a category that students are in that we would want classroom teachers to pay a little bit more specific attention to. They might need some additional help in the classroom to really access core instruction and be able to get what they need out of their mathematics program. And then we have a category called high risk. And with our high-risk kids, these are the kids we want to make sure that we are providing additional supports for. Mr. Schultz had mentioned that we test all students. So some of these students who are in high-risk categories are receiving special supports through special education on their IEP, maybe through ELL services, maybe through intervention. And so there's all ways to look at, there's different ways that we will support kids in that high-risk category. This really, for the first time in math, gives us a quick peek at kids who might need enrichment too. And what we've always had before, we've looked at the kids that struggled, but maybe not the kids who also needed that enrichment. So this gives us a very fast, quick peek saying, we might need to do something a little bit extra for these kids who are on that college-bound track. And then again, identifies those kids that need the intervention. So here's our first look about the information that it's provided us for this first time. One of the things usually when we're up here talking about data, we usually have some analysis to go along with this, but with this first data point, there's not a lot of analysis. It just is what is there. So when we look at, we talked about those high-risk categories, some risk and low risk. At K1, we do not talk about college pathway. They do not give us scores for college pathway. So as we look at this data, we can see really that about 40 to 45%, right around 45% of our kids are accessing our core programs without difficulty. They're able to handle that and do that. And then about another 20 to 27% are going to need some additional support in accessing that core program. And then as you can see, about a third of our kids really are at risk in mathematics right now, and we need to be providing some levels of support for them based on this data. When we look at grades 2 through 8, now you see the college pathway going added into this mix. And you're seeing lots of varying levels. And again, we don't really have an analysis for this yet as to is this particular to a cohort? Is this a trend we're going to see? We just know right now that there's some varying different levels as we look throughout the different grades. But what you do see here is ranging from anywhere 50 to 60% of our kids are absolutely accessing our core math program without any difficulties, and then about another 15 to 20, even up to 30% of our kids are accessing that with just some help in the classroom. And the range again for kids that are high risk, it's much smaller than the kindergarten range was for the high risk at most grade levels, but those are the kids that we'd be providing interventions for. So what are our next steps? As Mark mentioned, we're going to continue monitoring this so we can start to determine results trends, where we might need additional supports, where we might need additional intervention, where we might need more high-level supports for kids with what we're doing. So we need to start looking at those trends as we do that. We want to look from beginning to end of the year as we start to administer this to make sure that we have kids who are proficient or who are at low risk or college bound maintain those levels, that we're serving all kids at those levels as well. We will incorporate this into our DAYS process. DAYS means determining appropriate intervention services. That process has been very well established for reading for a few years. This is the first time we have a math screener that can help with this process. This is the first step in looking at students and saying, what interventions might they need? The screener gives us a go-to that says, here's a group, now look further. And so with that in our process, then we have that group that we can start with, and now we look further and we do maybe some more diagnostic testing and looking to see really what did the kids know and don't know, and how do we provide that appropriate service? How do we monitor that service to make sure what we're doing is making a difference? And then how do we change and adapt to make some decisions on, might a child need more type of intervention, longer intervention, or nope, they've grown and they're accessing core like we would hope that they would. And those are basically what we'll be doing that. And this FAST program gives us the monitoring tools. We haven't started with that yet, but it is what we will be doing with those kids who are in that high-risk category to make sure that we are meeting their needs on like a bi-weekly basis. Not bi-weekly, bi-monthly basis, not twice a week. So it's really fast, but we don't want to do that. So questions that we may answer for you.
Remind me what tools we have in place that we're utilizing in addition to the curriculum that students are using for math. Like reading, there's Lexia.
We don't have a program like that in math so much. We do have a program called Bridges that goes through K-5. And it is a program that teachers can use in the classroom with kids, but it is really a small group based where they have additional lessons. And so if kids are struggling in a certain area, those kids that I were talking about that are some risk or even a little, they have that to use with that. Our coaches can use, they do work with some intervention groups, but we don't have full-time interventionists in math. And so those kids in the high-risk group are primarily served with coaches and teacher support, extra teacher support with a material called Bridges.
Is that something that you would want to have for extra support, or is it just more one-on-one kind of education?
You know, we know how valuable Lexia is, and we have that research base behind it to support that. It is certainly not outside the realm that we would be wanting to look at what intervention materials might be appropriate for kids. But if you look how reading was rolled out, and when we started to see those needs, we were better able to get some supports for those. So this is more our initial steps with this.
Okay.
And then we're looking to see always our first priority is, are we getting kids access to the core like they need to, and then how are we doing that? So that does kind of go into that next step. We do have good small group things. We haven't yet really started looking into what might be a program like Lexia that kids could get on and do that we know is reliable and valid and has known results.
Yeah, so I guess just how long will it be until we actually have like an actual data set that we can kind of see the trend? Would that be like after a full year of seeing
Well,
this,
trends
or-
we usually like to look at about 3 years. After a year, we can look at some things that we think, well, you know, this maybe looks like it was cohort or not cohort, but really it takes a good 3 years to look at a trend. We'll be able to find some things, you know, by the end of next year that would say, how did kids start proficient? Did they end proficient? You know, that'll give us a good data point next year that we won't even have yet this year. So, but it'll take about 3 years for some trends.
So the fast reading assessment, that is required by the state, is it?
Yes.
Not, in math, we are opting to do this assessment?
Yes, it's recommended by the state,
Okay.
not this particular assessment, although they are starting to push it out a little bit more. It wasn't pushed out so heavily as the math was, and saying, or the reading, that they said they would pay for it and do that, which is one of the reasons we chose that. This is the same suite, the same company that did that, so it made good sense for us to continue down this. It, again, is a very valid and reliable measure as a screener to look at what we're doing with that. Right now, It is more trending across the state to go to the FAST. They're pushing things out through our AEA system on training and some accessibility through that.
What is, Amanda, these are taking the temperature, not testing. So is there a number where we go, oh, that's too much high risk? Oh, that's not what we expected?
Fever.
They have a fever, yeah, I mean.
It's an epidemic.
How do we use this, how do we use this with the information we have and our testing we know and other things?
Our best information says that we would want 80% of our kids to access core without intervention. And so if we hit 80% accessing core without intervention, we would be dancing in the streets.
Very healthy.
And very healthy. We'd be super healthy. And that's our goal.
And so when the first one popped up, kindergarten's at 70% and first grade 66. So that's that kind of goal that they're measuring exactly for us. How far are we from 80?
So college pathway, low risk, some risk, have that be 80%.
College pathway, low risk, some risk, yeah. Mhm.
And then how long have we had this, did this information back up what we already knew? Give us different insight? I mean, just how does this tie into to what
I
we
think what's so
we know?
interesting about math is we really didn't have good information to know, we didn't know what we already knew, to say we think kids fall this way in math. The only way we were assessing kids in math before was on Iowa assessments and on our district math assessments. And we don't fall into categories that would say these kids are that is more proficient, not proficient, proficient, not proficient. And this is a little bit different than that. So I don't know that we had good predictors of what this was going to say before. We're hoping this can be a predictor of what we will maybe notice when we do our MAP testing, which, that first administration is coming up here very quickly.
And then the 5th and 6th grade dip in this, I mean, is there, what do we take out of this where we go, yeah, that seems like we should be worried, so we're looking for certain things going forward, and how do we change instruction, support, whatever, to try to
I think the very
guide those
next thing
things?
that would happen is we would look at our MAP testing. And does our MAP testing show us something similar with a dip in 5th and 6th grade? And as we look at data over time, or as we start to dig deeper, the one thing the screener isn't going to give us is being able to dig deep and say, oh, it's because they don't know fractions, or they don't. When we start looking at MAP, we will have information that says, these are the areas that kids struggle. Here is where your curriculum is not meeting the needs of most of your kids. We could start to make some inferences like that based more on the map than we can off of this.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. So now we move on to our informational presentations.
Great.
And
The next presentation that we're going to have, Mr. Groves had talked with Mr. Wilson about this presentation and wanting this presentation to go before the board. So it is a great presentation. It's a celebration. So Mr. Wilson's going to set the stage for our presenter.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Kirk Mattson, who's our representative from Silverstone Group regarding risk management and our workers' comp coverage. And his presentation tonight is going to focus on the success of our workers' compensation coverage and the employee safety program. So when Mr. Finger gets that up and running, we'll get ready to go there.
Just a teeny bit of, there we go.
Just gonna roll that then.
Left and right arrows.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to present this evening. As Dean said, my name is Kirk Madsen. I work for Silverstone Group. We're the broker that have provided risk management services to the district for many, many years. I know some of you on the board, but a little bit of background or historical information about myself. Pardon me. Born and raised in Council Bluffs, lifelong resident, proud graduate of Thomas Jefferson High School, and in fact, my first career was in education. I was fortunate to be able to go back to my alma mater and teach English, coach girls basketball, boys tennis, boys golf, although my game would not reflect that. So it was really, really a privilege. And today what I'd like to do is really go over briefly the property and casualty side for the district, but basically what I want to do is focus a lot on the workers' compensation program. Hopefully, I can educate the board on really some truly, truly amazing things that have taken place in the district and with the employees relative to safety in the classroom and the financial impact that that has on the district as well. With that, it's nice to be able to come up and tell a good story, and I really think the district has a wonderful story to tell. It's labeled a worker compensation success story. A little background information. In 2010, 2011, the district was really in pretty dire straits when it comes to the workers' compensation program. And the experience mod, which is just one factor when you rate for the premium. You look at class codes, remuneration, but the experience mod is really, really a driving force on the cost for your workers' compensation program. At 1.42, basically it was saying the Council Bluffs Community Schools was 42% paying more for their work comp insurance than the average school in the state of Iowa, the norm being 1.0. So at that time, I mean, the carrier gets a little nervous, and truly, our options were limited. It's one of these, we got to sit down and take some action and make this a priority. And change needed to be seen. Some of the options for us were, well, limited, potentially the assigned risk pool. And if any of you know about that, it's not a good place to be. The rates would go up considerably. The carrier that we were with, United Heartland, said we're going to stay with you, but we need to see change. The premium in 2011 was $1.2 million, and that's a guaranteed cost program. And obviously, this attracted attention from district leadership. Something needs to be done. So what took place? In 2012, there really was a renewed focus on safety and making safety a priority in the classroom. And a lot of this, I got to give credit to Janet Reiners, who really spearheaded this as a major focus or initiative for the district. The key was to change patterns. And what was needed was buy-in from all levels and all employees. And as a former educator, you know, I know how that change just doesn't come overnight. You don't change a culture overnight. You needed to have buy-in from the administrators, the teachers, the para-educators, custodial service, food services, top down. So what happened is committees were formed in each building, safety committees, and each building was given a budget. They needed a way to pay for safety fund projects, and they needed a mission. So Safety Day was launched to kick off in the fall with a second day in the spring. This is just a picture where staff wear their safety gear. And this next slide. I was fortunate. I had the opportunity to walk around to a variety of the buildings, and it was really, really cool to see staff, teachers, students engaged in safety activities. And I just listed a few of the things that I was able to witness. There were school poster competitions, scavenger hunts, question and answer activities, developed newsletters, building inspection, recognition of staff, and safety videos. I think this really says it all. These photos have ownership written all over them. The staff certainly are engaged. What we also were able to do is provide safety dashboards, and I think these are really, really critical. In other words, a scorecard was developed showing claims by location. So what you can do is you can take those analytics, which are very, very important, and break down by school what the claims are, where the claims are, how much has been paid, how much has been incurred, the percentage of each claim, and then use that data in a positive way to try to mitigate and prevent loss going forward. Basically, what these dashboards show, in my mind, are areas of opportunities. United Heartland and Silverstone helped pinpoint focus on when, why, type of injuries, slips, trips, falls, combative students, lifting. When you know what the type of injury is, like I said, you can focus on that and try to mitigate it going forward. Makes developing solutions easier rather than throwing darts. And this is just a dashboard of the types of claims that we see in the district. You can kind of read through that. Resident, patient, combative, fall, slip, or trip injuries, strainer injuries, et cetera. And then also it shows the total incurred. Results. Basically, after 5 or 6 years of hard work, and it didn't come overnight, there was a shift in the safety culture. After some pretty bad years, the CB schools realized they can control this. Work comp is with the work and effort that had been put in, the district realized that these costs can be controlled and lowered. So that experience mod that I talked about earlier, in 2010, which was 1.42, you can see the trend. This year, it was 0.90. It's projected to be 0.86 for next year. And just that 4 percentage points equates to over $20,000 in savings to the district. And once again, we're at 0.86 where the average school is 1.0. We were at 1.42, so we're performing quite a bit better than the average school in the state of Iowa now. Seeing the light, in 2014, the nonpareil got wind of the success. Program net CB schools about 250,000. Going forward, from 2014 onward, we've probably added an additional $325,000, $350,000 in savings, which is outstanding. The culture shift. Employees, think about safety and work in a safe manner. Safety is embedded in the daily translation. 1,200 employees on board buying in. Premiums this year were $696,000. In 2012, it was $1.2 million, a savings of $536,000. And when I think about this, the monetary savings is one thing, but I think it's the direct result of the hard work, the dedication from the district, its employees, and really focusing and making safety a priority in the work environment. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions on the board?
I just have a comment. So the biggest claim appeared to be from combative students. And I think that the staff should be commended immensely because they had changed the culture of buildings. And that was part of our school improvement plan to embrace the mental health issues and create more caring environments and how to address bullying and those types of problems. And so it's not just a physical culture change anatomically, but I think it's more of a mental change that really has gone on for the last 3 or 4 years that staff needs to be commended for.
Yeah, and I think also staff, while that mod continued to decrease, the district at the same time was increasing a variety of programs at the building levels as well, which speaks volumes
Right.
as well in some pretty intensive areas.
And that's going well above and beyond what they've been trained to do, and so I think that it's really a commendable thing. Good job, Mr. Hamilton.
Any other questions?
No questions.
Great.
Thank you
Thank
for
you very
coming.
much.
Very good. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you so much. Our next presentation is on the Abraham Lincoln High School parking lot. As many of you have been to Abraham Lincoln and have seen the signs and the cracking, and Ms. Stacy came to us this year and talked about wanting to really go back and fix that. And so we have her, Ms. Pettis and Mr. Olson, Jared from HGM here to present tonight on the proposal that we're bringing to the board that we will bring back later for approval. But we do have some serious needs, so Stacy, I'll let you start the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Merlo. Can you guys hear me? Thank you, Dr. Merlo, and good evening, Board. Thanks for having us tonight. Jared Olson with HGM is also with us to help with the technical parts of the program here. So our first slide is basically an overall site plan of Abraham Lincoln High School. And as you can see, we have several parking lots at the site. We've got a baseball parking lot at the upper left-hand side. We have our student lot that's in the middle. And then we have a staff parking lot towards the bottom. And of course, we have a service drive with a staff lot in the back of the building. Our main concern right now is this student lot right here in the middle. And as you can see, it's the biggest lot at the site. One other thing to note, we have a very hilly, steep site. We take a lot of water, a lot of runoff onto this parking lot. It comes down, you can see the little arrows, comes down through the wooded area, across our fields, and into the student lot. Our main focus would be kind of like a 3-year summer phased parking lot replacement at the site. And with that being said, here's a little bit of history on the parking lot. The original lot was actually built during our construction phase out at Abraham Lincoln in about 2008. It was one of the first parking lots that they poured out there, and it took a lot of heavy abuse during the construction phase out there. So a lot of truck traffic, a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of materials coming across that parking lot. Also, as we all know, living in Iowa, winter weather is kind of brutal around here. We see a lot of freeze-thaw cycles, as well as, we put a lot of product down to keep the ice off the parking lots, and of course, our plows kind of hard on the parking lot as well. We have patched and repaired 3 areas of this parking lot over the last few years, but unfortunately, we're starting to see some major failures out at the parking lot, and Jared's going to go into some details on why we're seeing some of that.
Stacy? Well, many of you board members that have been on the board for a while have seen me up here talking about concrete and some of the efforts we've taken at other sites trying to get it under control. I believe I've spoke to a few of you a couple years back with one of the patches that Stacy was talking about where we were tackling the bus lane. And during that project, we identified a few things that were concerning about the pavement thickness and the subgrade quality. But seeing as that none of the current staff or myself were involved in the design or construction of this parking lot 10 years ago, we wanted to do a little bit of investigation. So we had Teal Geotech go out this spring, as soon as the frost came out of the ground, took some core samples, which was a little bit later this year than normal, took some core samples and some soil samples, and all in all, the pavement thickness is fairly appropriate for the parking lot, throughout the parking lot, and it appears that you got about the right amount of concrete in there. And the subsurface soil was actually fairly solid, which also eliminated some of the more typical things that cause problems with parking lots. And looking at it, though, the obvious problem did become the water issues on the site. This parking lot was initially constructed directly on soil, right on dirt. That's not an uncommon practice around here. We've done it on many of the parking lots in the school district with success, and they've held up well for quite a long time. However, at this site, as Stacy mentioned, there's a lot of water coming at the site. There appears to be a little bit of underground transportation of water as well happening through here. And due to the fact that this was cut into a hill and we're in more of the cohesive soils, the clays and silts, it doesn't absorb the water or let the water filter through. It just holds it and slowly releases it back out. Water in concrete, as a general rule, is a bad thing once the concrete's established, and we continue to saturate the concrete every time it gets wet. And it's kind of a situation where the more of a problem you have, the faster it exacerbates itself, because the more cracks and more joints you have open, the more water it catches as it flows across. And unfortunately, being directly on dirt, we don't have a way in the current parking lot to deal with the water once it gets into and under the concrete. This picture right here actually is a fairly telling photograph. It was taken 2 days after the last rain, and you can see the water still squeezing out from underneath the parking lot as it's slowly getting out of here. If we were to have freezing temperatures immediately after this, we would get differential freeze-thaw, heave, and the movement of the concrete slab actually causes the soil to move, which loses strength underneath it, and it just is a compounding problem. Another issue that school districts have across the state and this entire region, and in line with Kirk's presentation actually, is the need to prevent slip-fall accidents, and a significant amount of de-icing product needs to be applied on school sites. Many of you are aware that salt is very corrosive on concrete, especially new concrete. This would appear to be a situation where the water, as it comes down the long parking lot, is actually picking up salt off the parking lot, then getting into the joints and speeding up the degradation. Just in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a significant decrease in serviceability of the parking lot. We're breaking the project up into 3 chunks, generally into thirds. The actual detailed design is a little bit more refined than this. The phase 1 cost estimate there is the actual construction cost estimate. The phase 2, phase 3 prices that we're proposing for the next few summers would include design fees as well as anticipated construction cost increases. The phase 3 area actually includes a good chunk of the bus lane, so that's a far heavier concrete that's going to be in there, which is a little bit of the difference in the price there as you get to the 3rd year. But to deal with the underlying issue that appears to be causing a lot of the problems, we're going to install several methods to deal with water on this project, not just in the first phase, but also to slow down the deterioration of the coming phases of pavement replacement. We're going to place this on a 6-inch bed of gravel. It's a little bit more technical term than that, but it's gravel. And in that, we're going to install longitudinal sub-drains, which basically are a French drain that goes underneath the slab. Any water that does get underneath the parking lot will get captured by these ideally as it moves through the parking lot and caught by a trunk line just in the downhill curb line. Basically get the water quickly out from underneath so it doesn't have a chance to soak the clays and the silts, which cause them to have problems, as I mentioned earlier. And then we're taking an additional 3rd step, because you can never have too many belts or suspenders. We're also putting in a trench drain along the phase break, which basically is going to hopefully eliminate these long sheet flows of water that are transporting soil, water, and salt and concentrating it all at the bottom part of the parking lot where the salt just sits and really speeds up the failure of the concrete down there. So we're doing a 3-part effort to try to get rid of the water that appears to have been causing a lot of the problems on the site. We're going to take one final step to deal directly with the salt. This is a process we've been doing on previous projects. I've talked to the board about this before. It's fairly new to the region, new as in the last 5-10 years. It's been getting pretty aggressively applied. It's actually a joint sealant that's actually a chemical inhibitor to salt. And salt tends to attack the exposed joints. So it's actually applied down into the joint, sprayed against the sides, and then wrapped over the top. The product lasts for several years. You can visually tell when it's starting not to work based on the way the snow melt's sitting on it, and then it's just time for reapplication. Where we have used this in previous projects recently, it has actually shown significant value. Bang for the buck, it's probably better than buying an extra 3 inches of concrete for durability. It really seems to be working pretty well with the few years of experience that we have on it. The project schedule, Stacy and Dr. Murillo mentioned this. We're currently out for bids for phase 1. We're looking to have bids back on May 21st with a recommendation for award for the board to consider on May 22nd. Contractor will move in ideally as soon as school is out and the parking lot's available and be done well before school starts back up. And then I believe, any questions?
Any questions?
So the construction would be complete before August? I thought we had mapped it out in 3 phases.
Yeah, the phase 1, just for phase 1.
Okay.
I'm sorry, yep.
So I recently had a parent express some concerns about parking at AL. And this parent's child was going to TJ for a class and then coming back to AL in the middle of the day, and there was no parking spots available. So I think we need to be judicious going forward. Who's allowed to park in the parking lot? Because we're going to be limited. How many spaces are we going to lose?
We won't be losing any parkings.
During summer.
Okay. So in the fall, it'll be, okay.
Each summer.
Each summer, we're going to do a phase.
So that won't be affected by it. So that's a whole nother issue.
We just need to make sure we get good lines, because even when I go, sometimes I can't tell where
Right.
the lines are. Once I get past down where the baseball and the softball fields are,
Right.
I can't really picture lines, and that's kind of where we're starting, is up in that area, and then working to the middle, and then ending up by the building. And I think that will really help us, but we need to get good solid lines so that we know where the parking is. And I probably should have this on, I apologize. And the next piece, that prior districts, we have numbered our parking spaces so that our kids have assigned parking spots. It may be something that we can consider if we can count how many spaces. That would make it so much easier.
We'll try to squeeze as many spots in there as possible moving forward. We know we have parking issues over there, and it's tight, especially on busy days where we have a lot of visitors coming in.
How many spaces does that lot hold?
I don't know that off the top of my head. We have looked at it. Not the first time the question's been asked, can we get more parking out of there? We're somewhat boxed in with the location of where the streetlights are.
Right.
Those have to fall on the lot line. But even if we ignored the streetlights, we really didn't see much gains for how, it was pretty much sardined in there to start with.
We have some curbed areas that we might be able to gain a few if we remove some of the curbs, and then maybe something up at the front, depending upon how we do the bus lane, but
In the
that would be third
past, we
phase.
had talked about, drawing a blank. What are the things that you can't drive over fast because speed bumps? We had talked about putting those in at some point because when the lot was empty, people were
Racing.
on property and racing. Is that something we've thought of since we're,
Speed bumps are great during the summer and spring, but when it comes time for winter and snow removal, they're kind of a hindrance. So I'm not sure if there's a good happy medium on that one.
There are things that you can do for traffic calming in parking lots, but they're mostly, short of speed bumps, which don't survive winter very well.
right?
They mostly come at the cost of parking spots.
How can those speed bumps they put down that are like the rubber eye, can those be put down, taken up, or are they,
They can be.
without degrading the surface too much?
Realistically, yes. My thought was the parking lot's in fairly rough shape right now. Anything we're trying to do on top of it's not gonna hold up that well. Maybe once we get through the phasing, we actually look at maybe there's a way we can do it, as maybe roll it into the third phase.
And then the trench drain, I'm guessing that's on the surface?
Yes,
That's
there's actually a few
super
out on the
great.
site already at the bottom end.
Yeah.
You're not gonna notice a whole lot on the top. They're similar to what they use on airports, where
Okay.
they got large, flat surfaces.
Is there and then this water, so we're be able to move water more quickly to our storm drains?
Well, we're gonna get it below ground quicker. It'll probably, quite frankly, with the smaller pipes and the longer runs, it might actually leave the site a little slower.
That might be better for the overall system.
Yep. But we're gonna get it underground and into pipes, which will help.
With all that work with the drainage and the gravel, what's the expectation on extending the life of the parking lot?
Yeah,
For the cost of those efforts, because 10 years doesn't seem like a very long life for the cost of the parking lot, so.
I'd say that's one of the more pleasant ways to phrase that. 10 years is not ideal for a new parking lot of any material. One thing that the 6 inches of gravel will also get you is pavements operate as a system, and it's a combination of the rock and the concrete and the soil underneath it. By adding rock underneath, you're actually using less concrete. They operate together. So you are actually at a little bit of a trade-off of cost there. But a reasonable lifespan for a concrete parking lot that's maintained appropriately, joint sealing, that kind of thing. 30 years is not an unreasonable time with routine maintenance. 10 years, if Member Grove was here, he'd admit that he's talked to me about it quite a few times as well. It's really, this parking lot's really just not a good example for the way things normally go.
Some of the other improvements we've done, or fixes we've done this in the past 3 or 4 years? Was it about 4 years back, we were doing things along the bus lane and other things? Is that all gonna be kind of then scratched or
So
stretched?
they've
or
actually
that-
held up fairly well because we beefed up the section, we made sure. My concern is that now that we know the problem is underwater or underground transportation of water, we might have compromised some of it. We'll find out when we get to that phase. We're not gonna replace anything that doesn't need to be replaced.
Will the project involve diverting some of that water that's coming off of the football field before it reaches the parking lot?
I looked at that.
We just don't have the slope.
Correct, and you're gonna spend a lot on pipe then. And you can get, with the runs that we would have to do, and there's not really a good collection system out in the city right away for that considerable amount of increase at that location, it'd be a pretty expensive, and I don't know how much we'd be gaining. If you recall the issues we had with the retaining walls that
Right.
were out there, it was a similar issue with this drainage. Now that it seems to be fairly stable, I don't know that I'm excited about getting back in there either to dig it up.
So do we have to retain a lot of the water on site still before it goes into the,
There won't be any change really upstream of the parking lot. We're not touching any of the flow patterns. We're just gonna catch it and get it underground a little bit quicker. So no changes to the treatment or detention on site are planned.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. And our last presentation this evening, Ms. Ostrowski is going to come to the mic to present our new marketing update and our new school district logo and tagline. And as she comes to the podium, I also forgot to mention that I wanted to thank her and Daniel for the work that they're doing, and hopefully you're following her tweets as she's tweeting out pictures of our board members this week and telling a story about your service. And I just want to thank her for that work because I think it looked really nice, and they've gotten some really good traction. So thank you also for responding to her and her questions. So I've got a task that I'm supposed to send out something as soon as she finishes. So I'm going to get mine ready. I got a special little reminder before she came up. So again, I want to thank you both for the work that you've done on this project. It has been a lot of work, but it has been a great year of improving communication, our website. And so I'm looking forward to your presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate Daniel being here to co-present. I'm going to take the lead, but he's here, and he is going to help me give to you a symbol of the new logo when we are complete with the presentation. I wanted to just spend just a few moments, if I could, reiterating the purpose. In the superintendent's post-100-day plan, it was created, as you know, from listening sessions, and people throughout the community shared with her their disappointment in the fact that people are making their decisions about our schools by just rumor or perception, but not reality. So you might recall, in our goal to attract new families and reinforce the pride, we had an open enrollment mini campaign to really invite people to come in and see for themselves. We wanted them to tour our schools. We wanted them to see how many things we have to offer students and families and all the great experiences they can have, kindergarten, actually preschool, all the way through graduation and beyond. Don't you love these pictures? During our kindergarten mini campaign, we invited families of first-time kindergartners, like someone at the board table, to come and listen and hear and learn about what the kindergarten experience is about. And so we were pleased to have a full house here. The students decorated their hats for the class of 2031, and we got to meet several of the families and welcome them into our school community prior to the kindergarten roundup on April 19th then. We were able to provide some support to the schools in order to do that more consistently across the district, using that fun welcome to the class of 2031. Did any of you take pictures, those of you with incoming kindergartners in front of the yard signs? So those are two, on top of the website, as Dr. Murillo mentioned, these two campaigns have really led up to the work to rebrand the district. And so over the past several months, we've been engaged with our partners at MSpace in brand research and development. And this has been a fun process to really help articulate through, to design a logo and create a tagline that would really embody the spirit of who we are as a school district. I shared this with you in March, but we had the Lantern of Learning for many, many years. In fact, it still lives in the piece of artwork outside of Dr. Murillo's office. Then in 2001, we created the Council Bluffs Community School District Where Dreams Begin. And it has had, as I indicated, a kind of a nice long life. But then several years ago now, we had the same goal. We wanted to make sure people knew what we were about. And so we developed the marketing campaign of Creating the Path Forward. We knew that going into this, into the future, we really needed something new and fresh and something that would share with our community what we're about and invite them into our doors. We thought, what a better way to introduce this, the tagline and the logo to you than with a video. So we're going to go ahead and run that for you. Cast my new tab here. So, in Council Bluffs Schools, we achieve more. And you notice, I'm getting a little emotional, that's weird. Okay, I love this district, it's awesome. Okay. You notice the little star, which is kind of a nod to our old logo, which is kind of fun, and thanks to Julie Smith for really encouraging us to do that. But it serves as an asterisk, which means more can be a lot of things. It can be, whatever is different for all the different students that we serve. Achieve more means something for our staff. It's a rallying cry, if you will, something that we can all embrace and be a real source of pride for our students and give everyone a little bit of a glimpse of what it is that we do in the Council Bluffs Schools that makes us different and unique and special for families. So I'm going to switch back real quick. Okay, so next steps. Clearly, we have had a history of a lot of places where you've seen, look behind you, the logo in a very prevalent way. But we, over time, and will judiciously start infusing the new logo and the new tagline in all of our printed materials, online, our website. You'll see a refresh there. We'll start using the hashtag Achieve More. Watch for it. We're going to launch it to the broader community tomorrow afternoon. So Dr. Murillo is sending an email to all of our staff to make sure they give a chance, just right after you, to be able to see the new brand and to hopefully start embracing it and sharing it. Our pride exudes from inside out. And again, having something that we can rally around and showcase and share is the goal here. So you can see there's lots of fun ways we're going to be using all the different marks to show what we're about and to kind of elicit that fun and that interest in our schools. And we can use it in a lot of different ways, but it's colorful and it's hopefully attractive in a really good way. And we're looking forward to using it in the years to come.
Good. Great.
So Daniel has a couple of gifts for you. Well, this poster is designed for all of our staff, and it says, "Families choose us because of you." May I read it here real quick? "Your dedication, compassion, and expertise allow us to offer more choices, more opportunities, and more ways to succeed for every child. Together, we achieve more." So those will be in the break rooms and faculty areas tomorrow at all of our buildings. And we are also giving to each staff member in the mailboxes tomorrow a sticker that if you look at if you look at Mr. David Fringer's Chromebook, you could see in fact, I gave him the first one. Did you already put it on? He's already put it on. So you can put it on water bottles, you can put it on anything that you might enjoy, have your phone case, but we wanted you to have those as a nice little symbol and the first glimpse for everyone as to what we'll be seeing everywhere here shortly. So
Great.
You've definitely captured what this district does, and it is more. People need to know that.
they do.
Nice little promotional video that you can get on all the TV stations there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we designed it specifically not to just introduce the logo, but to be about us. So hopefully families looking at our community, looking at where to go to school, will open that. Same with those who are looking for a good place to start their teaching career, for example. We'd love for them to see
Played
who
at
we are.
sporting events too, like on the
Oh, the scoreboard.
you know, like when we play that other school and they don't,
Little subliminal message there.
don't want to come. Play it.
I kind of like the Council Bluffs community.
Yeah,
It's very large. It's
very nice.
very nice.
Great job.
All right.
Good.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kind of leave that hanging.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. I see on here there's another board workshop development piece. And I wanted to ask last time if everybody got those things in the mail. Okay.
Yep.
And yes. So on this, yeah, Dave, right? Awesome.
Always on it.
I know he is. So on this, the four drivers piece with system, this essentially focusing our direction, right? Obviously now we have a rallying cry, I think, for us as far as focusing our direction. I did like their, one thing that they had in there about, what does it take to make meaningful change? I didn't find in this a ton of places where they had a particular questioning session or anything among board members. Did everybody have the chance to read the first chapter? And what were your thoughts from this and what you'd like to see as a group?
Well, I think what I would like to get from this is how we can use the information from IASB so that we can be more systematic in what we do in evaluating. I mean, because we have not had a very good evaluation tool at all to evaluate how we're performing as a board. So I think this kind of opens the door for us to be able to start having those conversations about what we can do together as a board to be a more effective board. We know that through our past readings that the most important part of the classroom is the well-educated teacher in the classroom. That makes the most impact on student learning in the classroom is that well-educated, continually educated teacher. And I think that's how can we be a more effective board if we don't get into continually educating ourselves on what it means to be a more effective board. So I think that's what I'd like to see come from these types of conversations is what can we do to be more effective?
Other thoughts? The board, I'd talked to Harry Heiligenthal about ability to come to us and just even work on kind of you know, what does it mean to be a board and roles and responsibilities and kind of how you can lead that board governance piece. He's not available for a while, but I think we're thinking early, as we get close to fall, that he could come in, sit down with us and go through something if we'd like, which I think is kind of a natural offshoot of this, you know. This was around their coherence book, which is a little unique in that regards. But there were some good, you know, questions in there, I think. You know, the parts about, you know, basically it's was it moral imperative? You know, do we actually believe we can meet that challenge? And how do we feel that? And how are we rallying around that? You know, and how do we support our support for that? How do we put out there? And I think it's, you know, some of the questions Jill was asking tonight, and it's like, how do we drive the path forward, or not the path forward, how do we drive the achievement of more with, you know, by the discussions we have at the board table? What other thoughts did you have in reading that kind of first, I guess, part of this book?
Well, I
or
think
this booklet?
another spotlight is that we have to be able to self-examine and be able to evaluate that process and what we're doing as an individual that contributes to the board. And I think that's just really important piece because that's why we're here and making decisions in conjunction after, you know, good discussion. And so I think we have to be able to self-examine ourselves in a critical manner to learn and move forward so that we can function as our reputation is, that we are a functional board and not dysfunctional. And I'd really like to maintain that.
It looks like a very good tool. I'm just curious to know, how do you see us working through some of the development, you know, what is that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I thought it's a difficult book because we don't have their coherence book to read along with it, and it's really meant to be a discussion guide around that book. I think some of the questions in it there were really solid questions, so. How can the board state policy, improve plans that move district towards realization of their, they call them moral imperative, but, you know, so how do we drive in governance that which we want to achieve as a group, you know? I do think that there's, you know, I felt like I'll say the recent collective bargaining process was tough on us as a board almost, you know? And I you know, the hard part is, you know, as a board member, you fill all these polls where you know, I have community members, I have employees, I have the district as an entity, you know, I have our taxpayers who may or may not care which way, you know, so we have a fiscal piece to it that we have to represent, you know, and as a district, you represent, in something like that, you represent the district, you know, and you're supposed to represent that in good faith, you know, which is then sometimes difficult to say, okay, how do we have these discussions around what is the proper way to treat our employees, you know? How do we make changes that we feel are good, even though we need to kind of stay at arm's length a lot because of that framework that allows collective bargaining to exist, requires us to be policymakers for the district.
And the back piece of that is we never really get a debrief process after. We never really get to talk about, okay, it's over, we made the decision. How's everybody doing? How are you feeling about it? You know, there's never a downtime to even talk about it. And I think that's
yeah.
really important.
That's why I'm wondering how what's the
How do we use
process
this
for
for-
working through
Right.
all of this as a group, or as individuals, but, if there's work that's happening as individuals, but we're not talking about the work collectively, how do
We
we
don't,
work,
'cause we
how do we
can't.
work through it?
Right, and that's why a lot of, I think, was, the idea to have board learning together at the table, right, where you can sit and have discussions. It's completely open, there is no, there's nothing behind the scenes or something where you're driving policy. But I think there are points that we need to make sure we're having, and I think if times we don't like the direction we're going, we need to have that out in the public.
Yep.
But it needs to be here.
Right,
So
at
when,
this table.
so when we
And
leave,
only at this
yeah,
table.
so when we leave, we're always supportive and committed to the group's decision, and then just trying to drive everybody so we're all consistent and that whatever it is we want to do, we do that as a group. How do we do that? How do we lead? And I think a lot of their questions in this are a little high. How does the board support student achievement of deeper learning goals that do not supplant, but rather build on a solid foundation of basic skills? That's kind of a interesting question. But I think a lot of these things we are questioning when we have reports are around these topics somewhat. When we get a report, we want to know, how does it tie into what we have? How does a new tool tie into everything else we do? So I don't know, that's why I think when we got these, it was kind of a little,
Heavy.
yeah, it's pretty heavy. But I think that, there's this focusing direction thing. So are we purpose-driven? What are the goals that would impact, what matters to us most?
I think we
We
have
place those up
new
here.
representation and new leadership, and that needs to be considered as well and discussed, and
We who have been on the board a long time, we have these guiding principles, and we've come back to that many times over the years, these guiding principles. I was thinking about earlier today, we reaffirm our belief that data is important, that careful analysis of accurate and meaningful data must be our cornerstone of our efforts to improve. No different than a survey with our staff. And we have to have meaningful feedback, maybe more in data. So maybe it needs to be around a discussion on our guiding principles again. I sure liked that the first time we did it. I don't remember, we must have changed them
Yeah, we did.
when we got the big, tall display on them.
Well, it was revisited
Yeah,
in 13.
5 years ago. And time goes by on the board. Fast, I think. So I don't know, maybe I think as people are just reading through, I guess as board, as we just read through each chapter as we go, maybe each month, read through, reflect privately, we'll come and just say, I think it's great to have a discussion at the board on what's important to you as a board member, and how does that fit with the ability of the board to try to drive some of that? I just spent, a week ago, I was at this VEX World Robotics thing, and I look at that and I go, wow, that's one of the best STEM opportunities for kids I've ever seen. And it's hard to get traction in a community to grow that, and you've got little tiny bits of efforts to get it done. But I remember, state of Indiana, the governor said, I want every school to have this. And it must have been a tremendous cost, but for them, they wanted people to have this practical application of STEM, that they could monitor in the classroom. So I don't know, I talk too much.
Do we know, is IASB planning on offering sessions at the convention when they, the day before the convention begins, they have those half-day,
Early bird sessions.
yeah.
We're gonna start going to them as a group.
Well, I'm just wondering if they're gonna offer anything, using this workbook. It seems like it would be a good opportunity for them to do something like that.
they have a
It's really early, I know that, yeah, but,
I didn't really see that they had even updated their pieces on this online yet. So they have their board governance with there's 5 or 6 of them, their main workshops, right? And all of those, I think, are great for board discussion, and we could do any one of those. I think it would be neat, maybe sometimes if we did all, I mean, I think we'd like to have everybody go to different things
To learn.
to see and then come back and discuss, right? But sometimes it would be great maybe to have everybody go to one, you know, if it's something around boardsmanship or direction as a board or something.
Well, then you could do a little mini presentation verbally or whatever
Yeah.
at the next meeting.
You know, the crazy thing is it'll be November in about 2 minutes.
Don't tell me when it's Christmas.
And we'll, yeah, you know, and we'll be sitting there thinking about this again, so.
so maybe what, for a month from now, at our next meeting, maybe we can
Monthly,
get
June.
sort of, maybe between now and then, we can kind of get specific about
Yeah.
what we want to accomplish with our discussion at the next meeting. Maybe we can, you can,
Yeah, we could
Send some
come out of
emails or
this with
something just
some,
to-
with some direction, maybe on something we would like. Yeah, maybe for chapter 2, so it's that focusing direction. I think the hard thing is we as a board, in my mind, I don't know, Dave, you've been on the board a long time. Like, I feel like we provide a framework loosely that administration works within, right? And then you set direction, but we're going after so many different things at all the time here. I don't, you know, we have so many different initiatives. You know, I think it's pretty hard to say, okay, what's our direction? Other than we want to achieve more, or we want our people to achieve more, or our employees. So, but this one on focusing direction, there's quite a bit of information in there. We could come out with, there's actually some questions on the ASB site on this, so we could get those and send them out like this week.
okay.
And maybe that would be a good place for some thought, and then we come back and discuss that. Could do that. Okay?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the first chapter from the? Okay. Alrighty, y'all. Thank you all for sitting over there while we're just jamming. We're adjourned.